All right, today we're going to be taking a look at solving for a variable, which is, remember, that letter is actually an unknown number we're trying to figure out. But the difference today is that we now have two-step equations. Yesterday, when we worked through it, we just had one thing we had to undo or solve. Today we have two. Our equation we're going to solve first is 14 equals 2w plus 6. I have two things going on. I have 2w, which is multiplication, and then I have plus 6. So I have both multiplication and addition. Now, just like when we worked with order of operations, when we undo an equation to try to find that variable, we have to follow a certain step, a certain order. But the nice thing is we're going to use PEMDAS again. Remember, this is parentheses, exponents, multiply and divide, add and subtract. The difference is because we're undoing this equation and moving and shifting things around like a puzzle, because we're undoing it, we're actually working PEMDAS backwards. So we're going to start with adding and subtraction and undo everything that we do. So we work backwards. Now, our goal is to treat this equation like a puzzle. We want to undo things so that we can get w all by itself on one side of the equal sign. Okay, so here we go. First step, as I look at PEMDAS and I work backwards, undoing it, is add and subtract. Well, I see on this side, I have this plus 6 at the end, and I have 2w. Well, that's multiplying. This is adding and subtracting, and if we're undoing, I have to do this one first because it's addition. So if I want to undo adding 6, well, I have to do the opposite, which means I'm going to subtract 6. Whatever I do to one side, I do to the other side. And now I'm going to rewrite my equation to keep myself organized. All right, 14 minus 6 is 8. The equal sign stays the same. 2w stays the same. And plus 6, we got rid of it. We canceled each other out, so they kind of cancel out there, so we don't need to write anything else. We've kind of moved forward in our puzzle. Now I have 8 equals 2w. Still not done because we don't have w all by itself. All right, I have no more adding and subtracting, so now I look for multiplication and division. Well, I know when I have a number and a variable right next to each other that that's multiplication. Well, if I want to undo multiplication, I have to divide. So if I have 2 times w, what we can do is divide by 2. If I do it to one side, I have to do it to the other side. 8 divided by 2 is 4. These two cancel out, which means we have 4 equals w, and we can flip it around to just mean that w equals 4. And we've solved that equation. So all it took, the only thing different from yesterday to today is I had to do 2 things to it, and I had to work backwards. All right, let's look at a little bit more complicated one. All right, I'm going to write, hold on, let me write PEMDAS up here again. PEMDAS, and remember, we're trying to undo this equation, try to figure out what number C is, and we're going to work backwards. It's a really unstraight arrow, but I'm doing my best. So as I look at this equation, there's something you see. Now, we know we have to do adding and subtracting first, and I see c plus 2 here inside this parentheses. But remember, parentheses is at the very end if we're undoing. So we have to keep c plus 2 as its own group. And so even though there's adding in there, it's in a parentheses, so we do it last. All right, so I look and I see I have division here. All right, so to undo division, I know I need to multiply something. Now, a lot of you might say, okay, let's multiply by 13, but that doesn't, multiply by 35 on both sides. But that doesn't work because we're not dividing by 35. We're dividing by c plus 2. So we can't just multiply 35 and multiply 35 because that's going to get us a really crazy big answer that isn't going to be correct. And in our equation, we're not dividing by 35, we're dividing by c plus 2. So this is the complicated part. We have to kind of shift this to the other side. Because we're dividing by c plus 2, if we want to get rid of it or undo it, we have to multiply by c plus 2. All right, if I do that to one side, I do it to the other side, so times c plus 2 in parentheses. And now I'm going to rewrite my equation. Always rewrite it when you do a proof, otherwise you'll make mistakes and it gets to be too confusing. So if I divided c plus 2 and I undid it by timesing c plus 2, those both cancel out, so I just have 35 on one side, my equal sign. On the other side, now I have 7 times c plus 2 in parentheses. Okay? Now I keep going. Once again, parentheses we do last. And so what we have to do is look, there's some multiplication. All right? In this, we had 7 times c plus 2. Well, if I want to get rid of 7 times, I'm going to divide by 7. If I divide by 7 on one side, I divide by 7 on the other side. I'm going to rewrite my equation. Well, 35 divided by 7 is 5 equals, these two both go away, and now we have c plus 2 on this side. It's like a giant puzzle. We just take it one step at a time, and we get there. Now, the only thing we have to do here, now we can do our parentheses. It's our last thing. Well, if we're taking c and we're adding 2, to get rid of that plus 2, now we minus 2. If we do it on one side, we do it on the other side. So now we have 5 minus 2 equals 3. And these two things cancel out. So 3 equals c, or our final answer. As we typically write it in algebra, we put the variable first as c equals 3 as our final answer. Okay, so a little bit confusing, but make sure you come back and rewatch this. If you're confused and you're looking at a problem, just watch me walk through everything again, and I think you'll be great. All right, good luck.